A fisherman turns into a miracle man. Peter was one of those guys whose life looked very mundane, routine, and not at all interesting. He was not a doctor, lawyer, actor, judge, or anything requiring education or bringing esteem. He was a fisherman in a township called Galilee, which was a lot of working class people, carpenters, shepherds, and fishermen. There was a lot of dust, small stone houses, and fish. Peter was a fisherman. It was a sweaty job, and he had fish hook scars on his fingers and calluses on his palms. He went out on his boat every day, rain or shine, but it wasn't to have any fun. It was to bring home food so he and his family could eat, and there was always the threat of not having enough. Some days brought 0 catches, and there was always the threat of taxes. At the time, the Roman government was taxing people to such a great extent that they barely had enough left over to eat. Even with the taxes as a chronic concern, the weather was a worse concern for fishermen. Squalls and violent storms could roll in without warning across the Sea of Galilee, and they had no weathermen back then, no cell phones to send alerts and warnings. A violent storm could rip your boat apart and leave you with no means to be a fisherman. Worse, you could drown. And there was no such thing back then as life insurance to help a family with a deceased husband. Sometimes when we put all the pieces of our lives together, it may look like God is not involved. It can seem to us like He is up there watching and not doing much to help at all. However, we need to remember a very famous poem. Sometimes God weaveth sorrow, but I, in foolish pride, forget He sees the upper. And I, the underside. The whole time Peter was repressed by a harsh economy and hard living conditions, God was using those things to make him stronger and more persistent and more faithful. God was working the spiritual side of Peter when all he could see was his circumstances. Every superhero has a set of circumstances. Spider-Man was very scary, awkward, and unsure of himself during his transformation. Superman had to serve as the water boy on the high school football team when secretly he knew he could kick a ball from New Jersey to California. The same is true with Peter. He led a hard life. Then, when he was with Jesus, he kept messing things up. One time, he denied 3 times that he knew Jesus because he was afraid of getting arrested. Another time, he got on Jesus' last nerve so badly that Jesus accused Satan of speaking through him. All superheroes get their superpowers through a strange event or series of events. Peter's power came through the Holy Spirit. Once he was filled on the day of Pentecost, he could do amazing things. When he spoke, instead of denying God, he spoke about Jesus, and thousands of people would get saved at one time. He went up to a man who had been crippled since birth, took hold of him, and had him standing and dancing in the streets. People of Jerusalem used to walk by Peter, hoping that his shadow would fall on them, because that was enough to heal them from terrible sicknesses. A fisherman who could probably not even spell very well wrote the Gospel of Peter. Today, millions of people still know about his fame. He was a superhero then and remains one today. I bet we all would like to be our own sort of superhero for Jesus, right? So when you feel down, unnoticed, and like your life is not going anywhere, remember that there are 2 sides to every story. God sees the upper side, while we see the underside. But the upper side is definitely being created. We can count on it. We just need to be ready for when God calls us to do His will.